Nowhere to hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Today we're going to talk about how hard it is to stand for the truth. Not that, the truth is something we should be running from, but in today's political environment, standing for the truth usually comes with a price. And Boise State University women's volleyball players learned that in a big way just a few days ago. I've got details coming up.
Press club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Welcome once again to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Twice a week I have a chance to sit down and go over some of the stories in the news in just a little more depth than you're likely to get through mainstream legacy media sources. Today we're going to be talking about kind of a hot button issue. And you've heard the old saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Well, hell hath no fury like a woke activist scorned. And the quickest way to scorn a woke activist is to simply assert that some things are true and some things are not true. Case in point, we're going to be talking today about Boise State University women's volleyball team and their decision to forfeit a game with San Jose State University rather than play against a trans-identified male player. Now, lest you think that, well, they're just out there trying to make headlines for themselves, please understand, first of all, Boise State University isn't the first school to forfeit a volleyball match to San Jose State in an apparent protest against certain NCAA rules. So, moving on to the story about Boise State. Look at this. Boise State women's volleyball forfeits game, refuses to play against man. Now, this is from the Christian Post, which is why you're seeing an accurate headline as opposed to, the apparent hate crime against transgender member. But the Christian Post, believe it or not, is actually doing a pretty good job of straightforward reporting of the facts of this story. And I really appreciate the way that this is reported. It makes it clear this was not some kind of political grandstanding move on the part of Boise State University, particularly their women's volleyball team. Here's the story from the Christian Post. They say a day before the team's scheduled game against San Jose State University, Boise State released a statement Friday explaining that they wouldn't participate in the game. This is what it said. Boise State volleyball will not play its scheduled match at San Jose State on Saturday, September 28th. Per Mountain West Conference policy, the conference will record the match as a forfeit and a loss for Boise State. The Broncos will next compete on October 3rd against Air Force, according to the Idaho-based university. Now, again, I would just point out, if this was some kind of hateful, whoa, they're just trying to victimize, these poor transgender athletes, but that's not what they did. In fact, really, they didn't even come right out and say, this is the reason why. They just said, this is the fact. We're not going to be participating. But if we dig a little bit deeper, you'll understand that they had some good reasons for their reservations. And that's what I'm here to provide you with today, because outside of mainstream media, there's a lot of condemnation, within the legacy media. Oh, how could they do this? This is just feeding anti-trans rhetoric. But it's also, it's not doing that in the first place. What it's also doing, though, is showing that it's okay to stand for truth, where the truth is concerned. So, although the university statement did not overtly mention the issue, several outlets have reported that the forfeit occurred due to San Jose State University having a man on their women's team. Now, the player at the center of the controversy goes by the name Blair Fleming and is a senior at SJSU, who's played 3 seasons at the university after previously playing at Coastal Carolina University. That's according to Fox News. So let me show you what the player looks like in question here. And look, there may be, some women that are like this, but those broad shoulders, the musculature, the Adam's apple, if this is not a man pretending to be a woman, well, let's just say that Blair Fleming is missing a pretty good opportunity. But in hearing from some of the teammates of Fleming, this is where you start to realize, it's not just a matter of, well, it's not fair for the, Boise State University women's volleyball to compete against this individual. One of Fleming's teammates, co-captain Brooke Slusser, is one of a dozen female athletes who filed a lawsuit against the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, over alleged violations of Title IX. And the class action lawsuit was filed in March by the group Independent Council on Women's Sports. and it claims that the NCAA has violated Title IX by allowing men to compete in women's sports. Now, look, I don't pretend to have all the answers to everything, but the NCAA has made up its mind that we're going to pretend, for the sake of our organization, that this really is a woman, and refer to Blair Fleming as she and her, and, just play along with whatever carefully constructed fantasy goes into pretending to be a female volleyball player. But the problem is Blair doesn't play like a female volleyball player. Blair actually can spike that ball pretty hard, and that creates a problem for some of the other athletes against whom Fleming is competing. According to the criminal complaint, Brooke Slusser claims she was not aware that Fleming was transgender despite sharing rooms together on team trips. Slusser also expressed safety concerns for opponents playing against Fleming. Brooke estimates that Fleming's spikes were traveling upward of 80 miles per hour, which was faster than she had ever seen a woman hit a volleyball, Slusser's complaint said, by the Boise State Daily. The girls were doing everything they could to dodge Fleming's spikes, but still could not fully protect themselves. Now, I'm aware of at least one female volleyball player, one athlete, who actually was given a concussion due to a spike from another transgender women's volleyball player, who, again, would prefer that we pretend that, oh, really, there's no biological difference between a biologically born male versus a biologically born female. Now, it wasn't Fleming who inflicted the injury, but it illustrates the point. There is a difference, even though we're supposed to pretend that there isn't. What was it Alexander Solzhenitsyn talked about? The first step toward truth is not participating in the lie. And it's not done out of a sense of meanness or superiority, but rather out of a sense that the truth matters. Reality matters. And every time that someone gives up on reality, okay, I'll play along, we move just a little bit further away from the truth. So, yeah, you're going to catch criticism if you are committed to living not the lie, but you're still doing the right thing. And it just takes one courageous individual to start that process and show others that it can be done. So kudos to Boise State for standing up for this. In fact, I want to make very clear that they have attracted actually a lot of support from a number of people. This is the Idaho Freedom Foundation. We stand with BSU's women's volleyball team. You might also be interested to know that Governor Brad Little has firmly come down on the side of the Boise State women volleyball players, saying, I applaud Boise State for working within the spirit of my executive order, the Defending Women's Sports Act. We need to ensure player safety for all of our female athletes and continue the fight for fairness in women's sports. Now, it may seem like a strange thing. Well, why would they just forfeit the game? Why would they just refuse to play? That's kind of the way it has to be done. And it's been done at the high school and even junior high level, now up into the collegiate level. The way to win is not to participate, which is so terribly unfair for these athletes who have spent, years of their lives preparing and conditioning and training to be top-notch athletes in their respective sports. And then they're expected to compete against biologically born males who, whether you like it or not, the reality is they often have some kind of an advantage. It's the way that Leah Thomas went from a mediocre male swimmer to a top-notch women's swimmer by pretending to be a woman. It's not fair to the actual women who are competing in these sports. By the way, kudos to Brad Little. I know he catches a lot of criticism, yes, from me as well as others, but I appreciate him stepping up on behalf of the BSU volleyball players and affirming that they did the right thing. Would it surprise you to know that Brad Little also has come out against Proposition 1? Now that's something that is worth noting. I love this. Matt Edwards, the Idaho Statesman, had a thing. What do you want to know about Idaho's Prop 1 ballot initiative? Just ask and we'll answer. And his question is, what is the governor of Idaho, Brad Little's position on Prop 1? Because right now, it's nothing but crickets from mainstream media. They don't want to talk about, what do you mean? The governor came out in support of it. And actually, the governor is part of a lot of people that are coming out in support, not in support of, against Prop 1. And This is a nightmare for the supporters of Prop 1 because they depend on, popular opinion. Look, by association, this famous person or this well-known person is in support. No, Brad Little is saying it's not a good idea. And he joins a growing chorus of voices who are saying this is a bad idea for Idaho. It unnecessarily complicates the elections. And it's going to be a cause of mischief, which is exactly why it's being proposed. People who could not win elections on their own merits want it because it gives them the option of gaming the system in such a way that they can get otherwise unelectable people into office. By the way, I love Dustin Hurst pointed this out. Another day of the Idaho statesman refusing to cover Governor Little's opposition to Prop 1, yet they cover this. Look at that headline. This is important. I'm surprised everybody didn't drop what they were doing to stop and read this story. The Dyson Supersonic Hairdryer is currently the lowest price all year during Prime Big Deal days. Yeah, they don't want to talk about Prop 1. But by gosh, that Dyson Supersonic Hairdryer, and by the way, the best humorous take on this of all goes to Brian Allman, who, look closely at his picture. The Dyson Supersonic Hairdryer, though. Thank goodness for people who are willing to tell the truth and willing to keep a sense of humor and maybe even laugh at themselves a little bit, because sometimes it just gets so terribly, terribly serious that we might just lose our perspective if we didn't have a few moments to laugh. I would encourage you, please, if you haven't already studied out Prop 1, take a closer, deeper look at this. Don't vote just based on feelings or promises, but it's fair. There's a lot to it. And I'm confident that if you really study it, you will make the appropriate decision when you're standing in the voting booth come November and making that decision. Again, kudos to Boise State women's volleyball. You did the right thing, even if it was the hard thing to do. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press Club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants